Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the apartment, the message glowing on his phone screen. His chest tightened as the words sank in, and his hands trembled with disbelief. He remembered the laughter they shared, the promises whispered at midnight. Now, silence filled the spaces that once held warmth. He sank onto the couch, clutching his head, feeling the cold sting of reality. "I wasn't enough for her," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Memories of her smile flashed, then vanished like smoke. The apartment felt empty, too large, too quiet. Every sound reminded him of her absence, every shadow a reminder of his failure. Tears threatened, but he held them back, breathing shakily, the weight of loss pressing down. Daniel realized, in that lonely moment, that life would never feel the same without her. Daniel sank deeper into the couch, phone lying abandoned beside him. Each corner of the apartment whispered memories of her presence. He remembered late-night talks, shared meals, and her laughter filling the space. His mind raced through every conversation, every missed opportunity, every tiny mistake that might have pushed her away. A hollow ache spread through his chest, leaving him restless and exhausted. The air felt heavier, oppressive with silence. Daniel thought about reaching out, sending one last message, but the fear of rejection rooted him in place. He understood now that love sometimes demanded more than he could give, and accepting that truth was agonizing. The evening grew darker, and the city lights outside the window flickered on. Daniel leaned back, staring blankly at the ceiling, lost in regret. Memories of shared plans and whispered dreams echoed painfully. He touched his chest instinctively, as if trying to hold his heart together. His mind churned through what-ifs and if-onless, each thought a sharp sting. Every sound from the street below reminded him of moments they once enjoyed together. Daniel realized that even the simplest joys now carried a weight of absence. The realization settled heavily. He wasn't enough, and the truth was irreversible. A faint breeze fluttered the curtains, carrying with it a memory of her scent. Daniel closed his eyes, wishing he could rewind time, fix what went wrong. The apartment felt like a tomb of their past happiness. Each object, a mug, a pillow, a picture frame, triggered flashes of joy, turned sorrow. His throat tightened with unshed tears, and he whispered to himself, "I should have been enough." Loneliness pressed in from all sides, his chest aching. Daniel understood that moving forward meant confronting his own inadequacies, a path he wasn't ready to walk. Daniel's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, cold and untouched. Silence filled the apartment, each tick of the clock magnifying the emptiness. Memories of laughter and warmth clashed with present sorrow, leaving him hollow. He thought about the moments he had overlooked, the words unsaid, and the effort never given. A quiet despair settled over him, but beneath it, a flicker of understanding emerged, acceptance of his limitations. For the first time, Daniel acknowledged the truth. He could not force love, and he had to face the pain of being insufficient in her eyes. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty cup of coffee before him. Morning sunlight streamed weakly through the blinds, painting stripes across the countertop. He remembered the mornings they spent together, sharing coffee and quiet laughter. Now the silence was deafening, pressing down on him with relentless weight. Each clink of his spoon against the cup echoed through the apartment. He wondered where he went wrong, which words or actions had driven her away. He longed to hear her voice, to feel her hand in his, but only emptiness answered him. Daniel's chest ached with longing, and he realized he had to confront the truth of his inadequacy. Every fiber of his being screamed for her, yet he understood he could no longer reach her heart. Daniel wandered through the city streets, earbuds in, music failing to drown out his thoughts. People passed by, their laughter and conversations like echoes of another life. He thought about the plans they had made, the trips they never took, the words that went unspoken. Every storefront, every corner reminded him of shared moments, now just ghosts in his memory. He felt small, invisible, overwhelmed by the knowledge that he hadn't been enough. As cars honked and pedestrians rushed past, Daniel realized that the world continued relentlessly, indifferent to his heartbreak. His chest tightened, a silent scream trapped inside, a desire to turn back time that he knew was impossible. Back in his apartment, Daniel slumped onto the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through old messages. Her words once brought comfort. Now they pierced him like glass. Photos of laughter, trips, and shared dinners flashed on the screen. He touched each image reverently, wishing he could relive those moments and change the outcomes. A sinking feeling of helplessness took over, and he leaned back, letting the memories wash over him. Every memory reminded him of his shortcomings, each smile now a haunting reminder that love sometimes demands more than one can offer. He exhaled shakily, accepting the harsh reality that he wasn't enough, that the connection had slipped beyond his grasp. Daniel leaned against the balcony railing, watching the sun dip below the skyline. The city hummed beneath him, distant car horns and footsteps mingling with the breeze. He remembered sharing the same view with her, laughing about small, trivial things, feeling a quiet happiness. Now, the balcony felt vast and lonely, a reminder of all that he had lost. The wind tugged at his hair and jacket, and he shivered not from cold, but from the hollow ache inside. He realized that grief was a living presence, growing heavier with each passing moment. Acceptance felt like an impossible horizon, yet he knew he had to begin walking toward it, step by painful step. As night fell, Daniel returned inside, the apartment bathed in dim golden light from the lamps. He sank onto the couch again, letting himself feel the weight of the day. Each object around him told a story of shared moments now gone. He traced the edges of a photo frame, lingering on the memory of her smile. There was a quiet understanding settling in his heart, a recognition of his limitations, and the harsh reality that love sometimes cannot be forced. Despite the pain, he felt a flicker of resolve to move forward, to find a way to reconcile with himself, even if the space beside him would remain empty. Tonight, he would face the first steps toward healing, however small. Daniel found himself at the office, trying to bury his thoughts in work, but each email and meeting reminded him of her absence. Colleagues' laughter echoed hollowly, and he forced a smile he didn't feel. Every phone notification made his heart skip, hoping it was her reaching out. Yet the silence only deepened. He remembered the conversations they'd had about the future. The shared dreams now shattered. Self-doubt gnawed at him, making every failure feel magnified. Even minor mistakes at work became unbearable, each one a cruel echo of his perceived inadequacy. Daniel's chest tightened with anxiety, and he realized that the weight of loss was seeping into every corner of his life, leaving him restless and raw. Later that evening, Daniel walked past the park they once frequented together. Children played and couples laughed, the world moving on without pause. His heart ached with the memory of her hand in his, her laughter blending with the rustling leaves. He wanted to join them, to feel a fragment of that happiness again, but guilt and self-reproach held him back. Every familiar tree and bench became a cruel reminder of what he had lost. He clenched his fists, struggling to keep tears from falling. Daniel understood that grief was not linear. It twisted and returned with every trigger, and the city around him felt both alive and indifferent to his pain. At his apartment, Daniel stared at the unopened letters on his desk, a mixture of bills and invitations he could no longer face. He remembered sharing laughter over mundane chores with her, how ordinary life felt extraordinary when she was there. Now, chores and correspondence were burdens, amplifying his loneliness. The room felt smaller, oppressive. He sank into the chair, running his hands through his hair, each breath shallow and uneven. Self-reproach whispered in his ear, reminding him of every missed opportunity and every moment he failed to measure up. Daniel felt trapped in an invisible cage of memory and regret, unable to escape the spiral of his own inadequacy. A message notification popped up, and Daniel froze, heart racing with hope. It wasn't her. It was a friend checking in, unaware of the storm within him. He typed a reply mechanically, his mind elsewhere, replaying past conversations with her. Every familiar phrase he remembered she said now seemed like a rebuke, amplifying his insecurities. His apartment felt cold, despite the lights on, a reflection of the emptiness inside. Daniel's thoughts tangled, bouncing between anger, guilt, and longing. He realized that the person he once was had been intertwined with her presence. And now, untethered, he didn't know how to navigate his own emotions. Unable to sleep, Daniel paced the apartment, restless and tormented. The shadows of furniture seemed to stretch, mirroring the weight of memories pressing down on him. He remembered her smile, the warmth of her embrace. The moments of laughter now turned into haunting echoes. Every object in the room seemed to accuse him silently, reminding him he had fallen short. Daniel stopped in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection, asking himself if he would ever be enough, not just for her, but for anyone. The room was silent, except for his ragged breathing, a prison of his own making, as he faced the crushing truth of his own perceived inadequacy. Daniel opened his email and froze. A message from her appeared, not warm or personal, but curt and distant. He scanned the words, disbelief clouding his mind. She had moved on, or so it seemed. The reality hit like a cold wave, sharper than any memory of shared laughter. Every past conversation replayed with new clarity, moments he thought were meaningful now seeming trivial. His chest tightened, and he slumped into the chair, unable to comprehend how someone he loved so deeply could step away without explanation. The emptiness inside him deepened, and a chilling realization settled. He had never truly been enough. Daniel's mind raced as he read old chats, noticing subtle changes in her tone he had ignored. The hints were there all along, buried beneath smiles and laughter. He remembered the times she seemed distant, and now each moment was magnified with painful clarity. Betrayal was not malicious. It was the truth he had been blind to. Her heart had shifted, and he had failed to notice. His hands shook, dropping the phone onto the couch. The apartment felt colder, the shadows longer, as he realized that love alone could not bridge the gap he had failed to cross. Self-recrimination and grief collided, leaving him gasping for emotional air. A friend called, breaking the silence, urging him to talk about what had happened. Daniel struggled to speak, words catching in his throat. As he tried to explain, fragments of memories surfaced. Her laughter, her sighs, the quiet disappointment he had failed to notice. The truth he avoided for so long now stood clear. He had misread her, ignored her needs, and clung to a version of love that no longer existed. Anger, shame, and heartbreak intertwined. Daniel realized the emotional walls he had built around himself had blinded him, making him powerless to see the reality of their relationship until it was too late. Daniel walked to the balcony, the city lights below reflecting the turmoil inside him. He remembered promises and plans that would never come true. The stark realization settled in. She had grown apart, and his efforts, no matter how sincere, could not hold her back. His reflection in the glass stared back at him, eyes glossy, expression haunted. The world moved on below, oblivious to his heartbreak. He felt a profound loneliness, a recognition that love alone does not guarantee presence or permanence. The harsh truth hit him like lightning. He wasn't enough, and he had to confront that reality to move forward. Back inside, Daniel collapsed onto the couch, letting exhaustion and grief consume him. His phone and laptop lay forgotten on the table. Shadows flickered from the lamp, dancing over the walls like the memories he could not escape. He realized that the twist was not betrayal but clarity. He had to face the truth of his own limitations and learn to carry the weight of loss. Acceptance felt impossible, yet inevitable. The silence around him was both suffocating and strangely liberating, a reminder that understanding the truth, as painful as it was, marked the first step toward healing. Daniel paced the apartment, restless and tense. His thoughts were a storm of regret, longing, and frustration. He remembered moments of miscommunication, missed chances, and opportunities he had failed to seize. Every memory was a sharp reminder that love required more than intention. It required understanding and presence. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to call her, knowing it would only deepen the pain. The walls seemed to close in, echoing his inner turmoil. Daniel realized that the confrontation he needed was not with her, but with himself. The battle to accept his shortcomings and face the raw truth of his own inadequacy. He finally picked up the phone and stared at her name, his thumb hovering over the screen. Heart racing, he knew that reaching out could bring closure or reopen wounds. The decision weighed heavily, and he realized the confrontation he truly needed was emotional, not verbal. The tears he had been holding back now pricked at his eyes. Every fiber of his being wanted to hear her voice, yet he understood that the strength to accept the truth mattered more than any fleeting contact. Daniel exhaled slowly, acknowledging the impossibility of changing the past, and prepared to face the climax of his own emotional reckoning. Daniel walked to the balcony, the night city lights below a blur of movement and life. He allowed himself to recall her smile, her laughter, and the warmth of her presence, letting the pain wash over him fully. The emotional wave was overwhelming, a mixture of grief, longing, and understanding. He realized that letting go did not mean forgetting. It meant accepting the reality that he could not be everything for someone else. The confrontation with his own inadequacy was raw and unflinching. And in that moment, Daniel felt the first flicker of liberation amidst the despair. A small step toward emotional clarity. Inside, Daniel returned to the couch, letting himself collapse into its embrace. His phone, laptop, and notes lay forgotten. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, facing the raw weight of his emotions. Anger, sorrow, and self-recrimination intertwined, but slowly, a new clarity emerged. He acknowledged that he had loved deeply, fought for connection, and yet, sometimes, love is not enough. The realization was painful but necessary. Daniel understood that the climax was not an external confrontation, but the culmination of his internal journey, the emotional apex where he could finally confront his deepest fears and grief. As the night deepened, Daniel sat upright, staring at the window. He allowed himself to feel the emptiness without resisting. The memories, the longing, the truth of his own insufficiency, all were present, yet he could breathe through them. He whispered to himself, "I am not enough, but I can still move forward." It was a fragile acknowledgement, a tentative step toward acceptance and growth. Daniel understood that healing would take time, but he had faced the rawest part of his heart. The climax of his emotional journey had arrived, and in that quiet, painful truth, he found the first glimmer of resilience. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, a faint sunrise spilling golden light across the countertop. The apartment felt quieter, less oppressive. Memories lingered, but the raw sting of heartbreak had softened slightly. He traced the rim of his coffee cup, thinking about the lessons he had learned, the hard truths about love, effort, and self-worth. He understood that healing was not instant, but a gradual process. For the first time in weeks, he felt a subtle spark of clarity and purpose. The absence of her presence still hurt, but Daniel acknowledged the resilience growing inside him, a quiet determination to move forward despite the emptiness. Walking along the quiet streets, Daniel noticed the rhythm of life continuing around him. Children played, neighbors chatted, and the world moved on. He felt a sense of connection with the small details, the warmth of sunlight on his face, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Slowly, he allowed himself to smile at small joys he had ignored while consumed by grief. The clarity he had gained over the past days anchored him. Daniel realized that moving forward required acceptance, that life could still hold beauty even without her presence. He inhaled deeply, letting the fresh air wash through the tension that had gripped him. Back in the apartment, Daniel rearranged books and notes, creating order in his surroundings as a metaphor for his mind. The small actions felt grounding, a tangible reminder that he could control aspects of his life even when emotions were turbulent. He paused, resting his hands on the table, and thought about the future. Acceptance was no longer a distant concept, but a path he could step onto. He understood that grief would return at times, but he now possessed the emotional tools to navigate it. Daniel felt a sense of quiet strength growing within him, an acknowledgement that personal growth was as crucial as any relationship. Daniel called his closest friend, speaking slowly, letting the words come without restraint. Sharing his thoughts aloud felt liberating, a release of the emotions he had carried silently. He laughed lightly at an old joke, a momentary reprieve from the heaviness of the past weeks. The conversation reminded him that connection and support existed beyond a romantic relationship. Daniel realized he had learned to lean on others without fear, to communicate his emotions without shame. Each word spoken was a step toward rebuilding trust in himself and in the relationships around him. As evening fell, Daniel sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker on. He allowed himself to sit in stillness, absorbing the quiet beauty of the moment. The ache of loss remained, but it no longer consumed him. He thought about the love he had given, the lessons learned, and the resilience he had discovered. Daniel understood that healing was a continuous journey, but he felt capable of embracing it. The apartment was calm, and for the first time he felt a subtle sense of peace. A fragile but promising start toward a life shaped by understanding, self-worth, and hope for the future. Daniel sat quietly on the balcony, the night sky stretching endlessly above him. The city lights below flickered softly, and a gentle breeze brushed against his face. He thought about the journey he had endured, the heartbreak, the self-doubt, the emotional battles that had seemed insurmountable. For the first time, he felt a quiet acceptance settling in his chest. The pain of inadequacy was still there, but it no longer defined him. Daniel whispered to himself, "I may not have been enough, but I am learning to be whole." The night felt expansive, a canvas for new beginnings. As he exhaled, letting the weight of the past slowly lift, he turned back inside the apartment, each step deliberate and steady. The rooms no longer felt oppressive. Shadows were softer, infused with the warmth of dim lamps. Daniel touched the edges of the furniture, tracing memories without clinging to them. The quiet understanding he had gained allowed him to breathe freely. He realized that love and loss were intertwined, and the lessons he had learned were his own to carry forward. A faint smile curved his lips, fragile yet genuine, marking the first sign of emotional resilience. Daniel approached the window and opened it, letting the cool night air fill the room. He breathed deeply, feeling the present moment fully, unburdened by regret. Memories of her lingered, but they no longer weighed him down. He understood that the past could not be changed, but his perception of it had shifted. The pain still lingered, but so did hope, a quiet promise that he could navigate life with the wisdom gained from heartbreak. Daniel allowed himself to simply exist in that space, embracing the fragile balance between sorrow and resilience. He sank onto the couch, letting the stillness envelop him. The apartment felt alive with the quiet hum of the city, yet there was a serene solitude that mirrored his inner peace. Daniel reflected on the growth that had emerged from despair. The understanding that love sometimes ends not from failure, but from forces beyond control. He accepted the imperfection of life, the impermanence of connections, and the strength he now possessed to face the future. With a deep exhale, he felt the tension loosen, a gentle calm settling in his heart. As Daniel looked at the city below one last time before bed, he whispered softly, "I will carry this, and I will move forward." The room was quiet, the city alive yet distant. The journey had been painful, but the clarity he had gained offered a fragile sense of hope. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the night wrap around him. He understood that healing was ongoing, and that being enough for himself mattered most. In that quiet moment, the story of loss and self-discovery reached its conclusion, leaving him poised on the edge of tomorrow, resilient and ready to begin again.